Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
A new jail, crime stats, MATA, and much more tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us. I am joined this week by a roundtable of journalists talking about some of the biggest stories of the week. Kaylin Johnson, a reporter with the Memphis Flyer. Thanks for being here again.
Thank you for having me.
Sam Hardiman is a reporter with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for being here again, Sam. And Jane Donahoe is Metro editor for the Daily Memphian. We'll talk about, we'll start with the jail and crime stats MATA. We'll try to get to some XAI news and maybe the status of the Grizzlies negotiations and even some of the potential cuts to TennCare if we have time. But Sam, let's start with just an overview of the state of the jail. I mean, we've talked about it a bit on the show. We've been reporting on it a ton. Other people have as well. There's not widespread, but there's a lot of people on both sides of the aisle who do think there needs to be a new jail. There's overcrowding. The facility is outdated. The locks are or were broken, which is problematic. There have been, many inmate deaths. You cover the city. Where is the status? Give us your take on the status of a new jail and the sort of political will to spend what is estimated to be $1 billion, but I think most everyone thinks it's going to be more than $1 billion.
Yeah, so this week my colleague Bill Dries reported that it's going to committee, where many things in Memphis and Shelby County go when they are hot button issues, and there needs to be more discussion. There'll be a ad hoc committee discussing this jail and the future of a new jail. In terms of, Sheriff Floyd Bonner told my other colleague Aaron Fulming this week that a new jail is not fixing everything, right? Like the overcrowding issues, the intake issues, the drug trafficking. I mean, has there been a jail that has been invented that hasn't had drug trafficking? I would wonder, right? And so there's a lot of hoops here, but at the same time, there seems to be more momentum to replace what is a dilapidated building in the heart of downtown at a time when downtown is also maybe not in the best place.
Yeah. Jane, we also reported on this proposal that former City Councilman Kemp Conrad, in his role, his day job as a commercial real estate professional, he and others put together a proposal to take the old Firestone site and put the jail and possibly some of the criminal courts up there. Mm-hmm. What's the status with all that?
Again, it's going to committee. The
and we're talking county commission committee.
County commission,
is that
right?
Yeah,
it would be a county-funded project. That group wants the county to spend $350,000 on a study, and the commission is not ready to commit to that yet. So, again, it'll just kind of get kicked down the line. I think October 9th is the date they're going to discuss it again in committee. So that's one site. There was another study out of the University of Tennessee that had another site out at Shelby Farms in addition to the Firestone site in North Memphis, and then obviously there's an option of rebuilding where the current jail is downtown.
And you mentioned downtown, Sam. I mean, there was some a little wariness about this proposal. I think most people I've talked to and heard from totally understand that really the jail itself shouldn't be downtown. It's right near the convention center and right near where a whole lot of redevelopment is trying to happen. That moving the jail seems like a good idea. Where is a question mark. But it spooked some people to the idea that all the courts would be moved and lawyers, and you would take a downtown, like many American downtowns that have been hit really hard in terms of office occupancy, and take those people out of downtown. And you've covered downtown a lot and redevelopment a lot.
Right. So yeah, absolutely, that is the concern. And if you look at what remains downtown, right now it's the law firms. The law firms are like the real tenants in a lot of these buildings that are keeping their occupancy somewhere. I don't know if it's above water, but better than it would be without. And so there's definitely that concern. At the same time, you have this sort of dueling pressure that Memphis has always felt, but the city decided to rebuild the convention center, and this is the city government, maybe not working entirely with the county government here, and rebuilt the convention center between a highway and the jail. And so now tourists that come to our city for conventions and to stimulate the tourism economy, one of the first things they see is 201 Poplar with a bunch of bail bonds across the street, right? And usually cars parked out front with flashing lights, right? And so there's that dueling pressure of how do you stabilize downtown with the jail in it versus what does it look like if the lawyers leave too?
I'll do a couple of stats here. Average daily, of the many problems at the jail that are pretty widespread agreement on, there are too many people in the jail relative to what it was built for. I think the sheriff's office has said that the max is about 2,400. Average daily inmate population has been about 2,800 for quite some time now. And there's also booking times as they've had more people in the jail and maybe other problems. In 2024, it took, 20 hours to book and process someone. Now that's quadrupled basically to 80 hours.
Yeah, some new numbers came out this week that the booking time, the time it takes to process a person into the jail was up to 83 hours, which, is 3.5 days, right? That's a very long time to be waiting to even be in the system. So.
Yeah, and Aaron on our staff who works for you has written about some of the really terrible conditions. And and as the folk like Josh Spickler from Just City, who's been on the show many times, he and others have said we don't need a new facility. We need better management of problems like that. You've got somebody who's not been proved guilty, stuck in the jail for 3.5 days without, forget trial, they're just in sort of bureaucratic limbo.
Sleeping in the chair, by many accounts.
We could talk more and more about the problems, but we'll leave that there, but we will continue to cover it. Other folks are continuing to cover it, and it is the legislative session, I'll say, is not that far around the corner, and there was really local bipartisan support for a new jail, reluctant on the Democratic side, as they said, but bipartisan support. So we'll be covering that as well as we get closer and closer to the new session. But I want to bring Kaylin in and probably Sam as well to talk about MATA. It seemed like earlier in the week, as we record this, that they were getting down to a couple of candidates for the new MATA CEO, but there was a bit of a wrench thrown in that this week. And so what is the status of new leadership at MATA and just MATA in general?
Yes, so earlier this week, the agency actually opened up a public submission period for writers to submit questions for their ideal candidates, and I believe they had it narrowed down to finalist A and finalist B, all with different transit experience. And as those questions started to roll in, they announced, I think before the Wednesday board meeting, that the finalist search had been paused, and it was found out that the city council had plans to appoint a trustee that they were going to look at. It's not really known what that trustee is going to do, but as of now, that CEO search is paused. And right now, the agency is being ran by interim CEO John Lewis of Transpro Consultants.
Which that contract was set to run out. Did it? Do we know? As of taping Thursday morning, it was going to run out on Thursday.
That is what our reporting revealed this week. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To go back in time for a second, some of the problems, there are many, but the last 3 CEOs have been have been removed or resigned. The most recent, there were $144,000 in questionable spending on the company credit card. There was a $1.2 million office redesign. There was kind of other suspect spending and just problematic spending at a time when 20% of the system's posted routes weren't running for almost a year from 24 to 25. So you, Kaylin, have written about all these problems. What is your sense of where, the city council obviously asserted itself this week in pausing the search, but what happens next with running, funding, improving, stabilizing MATA?
Yeah, so it's kind of unclear because last time when MATA went to the city council for their weekly updates, MATA had all these glowing reviews saying that they had so many procurement buses and that their on-time performance was going in, but city council is telling them that they have residents that are not being able to get on their routes or disabled riders who are having trouble. And so to keep asking for that other funding and still haven't been able to pay city council back, they're kind of in a limbo of we need more funding, but the city's not that confident in receiving or giving that funding to MATA because they're not really getting that return on investment for what the riders are needing.
Your take on what's going on with MATA and city council? It was definitely an Alan Wade moment, the longtime, very powerful city attorney who came and said, not so fast that we're going to narrow this down.
Yeah, so Kaylin said it well in terms of the skepticism that's been happening from the city council towards MATA. At the same time, not to, call out Alan Wade or anything like that, but where the city council really doesn't have statutory authority over MATA. It's not a division of the city of Memphis. And so he said MATA overstepped in its CEO search. Where the city council has authority here is they are the appropriating body. They are the source of funds for MATA, most of MATA's budget. And so for most of the past year, both the city administration, Mayor Paul Young's administration, and the city council have essentially said, every nickel and dime you get out of the city of Memphis, you need to show us where it's going. And essentially now we're getting from the city council that they're going to appoint a trustee, that they're going to be more involved in this process. Every time that they, these past months where they've been dealing with MATA, they've just sort of raked MATA over the coals. They've obviously been briefed on the PwC analysis of MATA's finances.
PricewaterhouseCoopers, the outside audit firm.
Outside audit firm. They know the real intimate details that maybe even the public doesn't know. At the same time, there hasn't yet, and maybe I'm wrong, a clear political will from 13 members that have to vote, that have to agree on something. 7 of them have to agree on what the direction of MATA is going to be, because all they've said is, why should we fund you? And so are we really heading to a situation where they're going to be having a trustee that's going to help find a CEO, or are we unraveling MATA? I'm not really clear on that yet.
Yeah, and you wrote a story in the last week or two. There was talk from the interim CEO, the TransPro outside consultant, that the trolleys, they could get the trolleys running again, but they don't have the money to get the trolleys running again.
Yeah, there's a difference between fixing trolleys, which is just literally, like fixing a car, and actually having the money to run trolleys, because nothing at MATA makes a profit, okay? Like MATA is essentially, and I'm not calling it a money pit in a pejorative way, but it is a bus system for those who have the least, really, that rely on it. And so there's no revenue backing this stuff up. It is all just government revenue that is going to provide this service. And so TransPro, essentially looking at its bus system, said, well, we can get the trolleys running with our limited funds, or we can run the system. And so they need further money from the city council to get those trolleys running.
And do I remember right, I don't know, either of you, the TransPro report, when they stepped in, and the trolleys actually, in terms of revenue production, the Main Street line was one of the most revenue producing. Is that right? I mean, it is, and there is a sort of downtown, we're talking about downtown earlier, a lot of downtown businesses, downtown entities would like to see those trolleys running again from a pure tourism, point of view. But we'll leave it there. I mean, again, there's more to come, even probably as we're recording this. But I want to switch and talk a bit about crime stats and kind of shift back to that. Maybe I'll go to you first on this, Jane. Crime, the Shelby County Crime Commission and Memphis Police Department have been reporting crime statistics that show crime falling from its peak for quite a few months now. Right. I mean, I'll run through some very quickly. That overall crime is down 20% through June 2025 compared to a year ago. Vehicle thefts are down 36%. Car break-ins, which was a huge, it was like everyone knew someone, if not themselves, it felt like, who had their car broken into or their car stolen. They're down 40%. Overall crime is back in many categories to 2019, pre-COVID. Property crime is back to 2011. Overall crime is down, is even lower than 2011. One big exception to that is gun-related crimes, which are about double what they were in 2011. With all that, the general trends and so on, it was, I don't know, to me, and I read it when it came out like anybody else did, that State Senator Brent Taylor and State House Member John Gillespie, who've done a lot of stuff on tough on crime type legislation, came out and said, whoa, we're not sure about these numbers. We're not sure. We want an audit, another audit that people want.
Yeah. They've asked the TBI to do an audit of MPD's crime stats. Sam actually reported on this week. They say that they're hearing from their constituents that they don't believe the statistics. They don't feel the downtrend of crime. So they think that an audit would help alleviate some of that skepticism. Now, whether that audit is going to happen, we don't know. And Sam can speak to this too, but TBI didn't confirm that they were going to engage in an audit.
Taylor, I think you asked Taylor, he knows firsthand knowledge of specific incidents of maybe felonies being changed to misdemeanors. He said no.
Yeah, first in their letter, Gillespie and Taylor said they had heard instances of this. And so when I got on the phone, I'm like, well, what evidence do you have? And Senator Taylor said he had heard from individuals. I was like, what individuals have told you about this? He didn't say, and that's okay. At the same time, this is a situation where you maybe don't have direct evidence, but you have, nationwide in Washington, D.C., we now have Congress and the DOJ looking into Washington, D.C.'s crime stats. And then there's this skepticism, really in Democratic-led cities, that crime stats are actually down. And so I asked Senator Taylor, hey, like, are we worried about politicizing crime stats here and making them a red-blue thing? And he said, the audit and its findings would be a step towards depoliticizing that. And so to Jane's point a second ago, how do you feel a 10% drop in crime? How do you feel a 3% drop in crime? It's not like a fever. It's not like the temperature of water, right? So like, how do you feel that? And so and also like crime rose to peaks. It's still very high nationwide. Memphis's crime is still very high compared to many places in the world. So like, it makes sense.
I think there are a lot of studies on, people's perceptions of crime lag the statistics, and especially where we were. And I mean, I said it somewhat jokingly, but it wasn't a joke. Just the car break-ins alone were so rampant that it just felt like it was everywhere and constant. And it takes a minute for people to sort of realize, is that really down from where it was? The other thing, I mean, I can remember many decades ago being in a sociology class in college. Crime stats have always been a hot button issue, and they're very hard because so much crime goes unreported. The other part of it, though, is the Crime Commission is a bipartisan commission. It's run by the former Republican DA, head of Tennessee Department of Safety, Bill Gibbons, who's been on the show many times. There's lots of different people in there, and Memphis has always prided, as long as I've been in Memphis, prided itself on its stats. When the numbers were up, they reported it. And I think, I don't know what you think, Jane, maybe, I mean, C.J. Davis is the MPD chief now. She was before the big spike in crime and during the spike in crime, and it didn't seem like they were holding back on reporting that crime was, borderline out of control.
Right. I mean, she told us this week that she doesn't have any interest in fudging the numbers, right? Her job is to bring crime down. I think she's been pretty clear about that. And these numbers that we're getting that show crime is down are the same numbers, like you said, that showed it was at peaks in 2023. So I think that the police chief doesn't have an interest in, or she says she does not have an interest in fudging that.
If they were underreported at 2023, I mean, it seems like the methodology, barring some other, outside audit or information, the methodology has not changed particularly over the decade. I mean, that they've really, really intensely, more than that, 15 years, they've been intensely tracking crime. Let me move on from that with about 10 minutes left in the show here and talk a bit about XAI and get an update there. Maybe I'll go to you first, Kaylin, in terms of XAI. Sam has covered, you've covered it, Flyers covered. It's been incredibly controversial in many ways. I mean, the business community, by and large, incredibly supportive of it. Mayor Young and other politicians, not all, have been very supportive of the economic development, the tax revenue that can come from it. Neighborhood groups, including politicians and activists, have not been as supportive, to say the least. What are you seeing right now?
So most recently, the NAACP, in conjunction with other groups and organizations here in Memphis, held a 2-day press conference over the past weekend where they wanted to present this framework of what they wanted to see, kind of taking that proactive approach, not really taking it laying down. They wanted to show what, if you are going to have data centers, is what we want to see. And we're also seeing more community groups canvassing for environmental justice, not so much in Boxtown, but some have migrated to Whitehaven, which many groups have said is an underrepresented community in other ways. They're not seeing the protests, they're not seeing people advocating against them. And of course, environmental justice affects all communities, specifically those in minority communities, such as historically Black neighborhoods such as Whitehaven. So people are constantly joining together, whether it be Tigers Against Pollution, which is more of a younger focused group, or you're still seeing the Memphis Community Against Pollution, still working to kind of create that framework of what they want to see with these data centers if they can't get them out of the city.
And, a couple of things. You and I, Sam, interviewed Doug McGowan, head of MLGW, a few weeks ago. People can get that episode at WKNO.org or YouTube or on the Daily Memphian site. We talked a lot about the power issues and the demands nationally, but obviously locally on TVA and MLGW with these data centers, which is a big part of this. But also, City Council, was it this week? And maybe Bill did the story, but City Council did a preliminary vote on some of the tax revenue and dedicating some tax revenue from XAI to the neighborhoods?
They passed the ordinance to set aside 25% of what will be substantial tax revenue from XAI for as long as it is in Memphis towards projects in a 5-mile radius around the site, 5 or 3. I'm sorry, I don't want to be wrong here. But to Kaylin's point, I don't think that there's going to be any way to get XAI out of Memphis. They have, by right, the ability to operate in the buildings they're in. But to the community concerns, right, and talking particularly about Whitehaven, is like we reported a couple weeks ago at the Daily Memphian that XAI in South Haven, Mississippi, which is, in this case, literally a mile away, XAI is going to be building what will be a private natural gas plant. We talked about that with Doug McGowan, and we talked about, that's alleviating stress on the TVA MLGW system. But what we maybe didn't talk about then, and what community groups really have a right to be concerned about, not that it's for me to say they have a right, but like, is air quality. Yeah. If you're building a natural gas plant in South Haven, Mississippi, which is a very much more residential and tightly populated area than the existing facility over near Box Mountain and Westwood. Like by census tract data, it is a lot more people. It is tens of thousands versus low thousands, okay? That's gonna be the projected air emissions of that could be worse than the Valero refinery, okay? Like in terms of nitrogen oxides, okay? Which is just one smog causing chemical. So we're really talking about a real hit to air quality in residential Memphis suburbia, essentially, Whitehaven, South Haven. And so those are real concerns for people to have. I mean, I'm not sure many people on this panel would want a power plant in their backyard.
Yeah, you did a story maybe a month ago now, I have no sense of time anymore, but on ranking the polluters based on, what was it, 2022 data?
2020 data.
2020 data, the best you could get. Airport was far and away the biggest, right? I mean, just all the planes and such. But at that time, XAI was sort of estimated to would have been about number 11.
Well, that's just the Memphis facility.
Just the Memphis facility.
The original Memphis facility. What we're talking about now for the emissions of what is South Haven, Whitehaven, we'll call it, it's right next to each other.
Sure.
They would be, in Shelby County, they'd be about fourth. Or not fourth, they'd be about second.
Together, those combined?
No, just this one facility we're talking about in South Haven. Together, they would be clearly second because it'd be about 500 tons a year of nitrogen oxides, which is a ton. I mean, that's about half the airport. The airport's about 1,000, all right, for every year. And, it's going to be essentially the second largest in DeSoto County. There's one Texas gas transmission facility over near Horn Lake, Walls area that emits a lot. But, this is a real ad. And so while the original Memphis facility, because it's getting most of its power from TVA, or will get most of its power from TVA, those emissions aren't that high. Because this XAI facility is going to be really getting most of its power from itself, those emissions directly related to the project are going to be much, much higher.
Yeah. Just a couple minutes left. I want to touch on a story that you did, Kaylin. The potential or predicted impact of the federal law, the Big Beautiful Bill that Trump and mostly Republicans passed. It will have big cuts to Medicaid, which in Tennessee plays out as TennCare. I think looking at it was a KFF, Kaiser Family Foundation study that showed there are 1.4 million Tennesseans, this is from your story, 1.4 million Tennesseans who are on TennCare. That's 20% of the state, 50% of the state's births, 50% of the state's children are on TennCare, and 240,000 people in Shelby County, so 20%, almost 25%, are on TennCare. What kind of cuts could happen as part of this bill?
It's a little fuzzy. Like I said, I wrote it a few weeks ago, but you're starting to see that the uninsured population of Tennessee is going to drastically increase. And like I said, that'll have an adverse effect on, like you said, the children who, you have senators like Senator London Lamar, who had done so much work in the legislative sessions to increase that health care for all. And so you're going to start seeing the adverse effects of that as well right now.
Yeah, you quoted KFF, the Kaiser Family Foundation, estimating 40,000 people in Tennessee will lose their access to Medicaid, and 240,000, a thing that hasn't been reported as much, will lose access to affordable coverage through the Affordable Care Act. That's it's the loss of subsidies that people get through Obamacare, Affordable Care, healthcare.gov. We got 2 minutes left. I want to give a quick synopsis of a very deep, well-reported story you did, Sam, of the negotiations between the Grizzlies and the city in extending the lease.
Yeah.
Walk us through.
Yeah, so really succinctly, we spoke to a lot of people around the deal who wouldn't go on the record because no one wants to actually talk about this on the record, but essentially the city and Grizzlies and the county as well have an idea of how to spend $550 million over 7 to 12 years on FedEx Forum renovations. They have idea of what the broad strokes of a second lease beyond 28-29 might be. The problem is they haven't agreed to that because essentially the Grizzlies don't like the condition of downtown Memphis. They don't like how the neighborhood around them looks. And so that is where things are. And it's really, I think the Grizzlies at this point have also made no interest in leaving Memphis. We reported in our story that, majority owner Robert Parra leaves probably more than $1 billion on the table by keeping the team in Memphis, just in sheer franchise value appreciation. If he moves it to another wealthier city, it goes up by $2 billion. This is a guy that is worth billions and billions of dollars, doesn't appear to be seeking that appreciation, but that is where things are right now with the Grizzlies.
Your take, Jane, full disclosure, you and I are both, not together, we are both season ticket holders of the Grizzlies, so I have my personal take on this. But also, I will say, I mean, I'm frustrated as a season ticket holder that I wish the Grizzlies would make more of a public case for why and the benefits that could come from this. Right. I don't know your take either as Metro editor or season ticket or as both on
or
this.
Memphian.
Or
right.
Memphian, yeah.
I mean, I think any good Memphian would admit to wanting the Grizzlies to stay put at FedEx Forum in downtown Memphis. I think any Memphian would agree that is best for the city. You know, why they're not talking more publicly, I can't answer that. I mean, it probably is, you know, part of the negotiation, the behind the scenes discussions, and you know, Sam's reporting has shed some light there, but you know.
Yeah, we'll see. And Jeff wrote a very good column, Jeff Calkins as well. You can get that at dailymemphian.com and get more of Kaylin's reporting at the Memphis Flyer. Thank you all for joining us. That is all the time we have this week. I mentioned recent shows with MLGW, but as well about MCS, the state takeover of the school. We had a good show on Porter Leith and early childhood education. All those at WKNO.org, the Daily Memphian or YouTube. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.